Ambassador Ahlf. It's hard right now because our world is focused on some other things other than International Women's Day. So today I read a great quote, and I won't say who said it because I don't have their permission, but they said today that treating each other with kindness and compassion matters. It is the true essence of diversity. It's more important than ever. So today, our minds may be connected to things bigger than Women's Day, but we still are celebrating taking care and showing people respect in the way we work, which is a core value of Swedish society. So I am Stacey Youngdale. I work for Volvo here in Greensboro, North Carolina, and it is with great pride that I support the Swedish American Chamber of Commerce, specifically of DC, the Carolinas, and Georgia. And we are honored today to have several guests. I'm going to start with Peter. And Peter, just give me a thumbs up if you want to say a few words before I introduce everybody else. Okay. So Peter Kvist is it's working for the ambassador in the Embassy of Sweden in DC. He has served for the Embassy of Sweden in several countries and also spent a lot of years working on the UN World Food Program, which is such a amazing contribution to the world. So thank you for that. And I will turn it over to you, Peter.
Thank you so much, Stacey. I really appreciate this opportunity to join you here today. And I think you started off with some very good points on Ukraine at this time. And let's just say here from the embassy as well that Russia's unprovoked and unjustified attack on Ukraine is a tragedy, of course, for all of Ukraine and for the rules-based world order. But let me also mention on International Women's Day, where we are today, that women are always among the most disproportionately affected by conflict. There's a clear link between sexual and gender-based violence and the conflict, for example. But women are also actors in conflict, and we know that peace agreements where women have been a part negotiating them, they are more sustainable and they last longer. So as Sweden stands with the Ukraine and in all our support, we also take a gender perspective. I want to mention that on this International Women's Day and in support of the girls and women of Ukraine, but also in contribution to peace in Ukraine, Europe, and the world. But coming back then to my overall presentation, it's a real pleasure to join SACC for this International Women's Day event. And you already heard from my ambassador, Karin Olofsdotter. And I'm hoping to give you just a bit more flavor of the Swedish government's work on gender policy looks like. So in 1914, our newly elected Prime Minister Stefan Löfven announced that Sweden would have a feminist government. He could have said that Sweden would have a government striving for gender equality, but he used that word feminist deliberately to spark debate and make our position really clear. This is something new. This is a promise by a state to consider the perspective of women and girls in all policy areas. And I know that that word feminist is still controversial to some, not least here in the United States. And I have quite progressive friends and counterparts who tell me that we could never do that here in America. But I guess it depends on what you put into the word feminist. And for me, this is just my view, but the difference between taking a gender perspective and a feminist perspective is that the feminist perspective is more holistic. For example, it's easy to look at the gender pay gap and say that this is unfair, people setting wages should stop doing that. But if you take a feminist perspective, you may start to look at the structural reasons behind the pay gap as well. Say the highly uneven distribution of unpaid household and care work, or the fact that professions traditionally dominated by women have lower salaries overall. So call it what you will, I think that's a view that most Americans can support as well. Now, leaving the semantics behind, I want to tell you a little bit about the overall Swedish government, the objective of the Swedish government policy in gender equality or feminist work, whatever you want to call it. And that is that women and men should have the same power to shape society and their own lives. And with that as a starting point, the government is working towards 6 sub-goals, which I will mention quickly. Equal division of power and influence, economic equality, equal education, equal distribution of unpaid household and care work, equal health, and countering men's violence against women. Now, there's a lot to be said for our policy work in all these areas, but as this is a SACC event, I thought in my speech I should zoom in on a bit on a few policies related to the economy and the labor market. But let me mention for all of these policy areas that we use what we call gender mainstreaming and gender budgeting. In short, this means that the gender perspective is included in every major budget or policy decision that we take as a Swedish government. And that starts with data. In order for you to make good decisions on gender equality, you must know how women and girls and boys and men's situations differ and how their policy decisions may affect their lives, how your policy decisions may affect their lives differently. And for this, you need gender aggregated data. For example, to solve a community's deteriorating sense of security, you may normally hire more police. But if you make a gender analysis, you may learn that women feel unsafe because streets are dark and that you should really invest in streetlights, which is much cheaper, by the way. Another example is to solve long commute times, you may think you should add a lane to a highway, but through gender budgeting, you find that women mostly use public transportation and that your investment should be to make bus routes more frequent and with fewer stops. So gender budgeting and gender aggregated data are really indispensable tools in formulating gender equal policy. And in Sweden, no major government decision is taken without them. So coming back to this being a SACC event, I understand our audience, I'm sure, is very interested in economic policy and labor policies, which is the focus of my talk here today. And I'd like to talk about a few Swedish labor market policies that aren't exactly new, but I think really defines the win-win aspects of gender equality. And there are 3 major policy reforms I want to mention, and that's separate taxation for husbands and wives, affordable childcare, and gender-neutral parental leave. Now, individual taxation of people in the same household makes it worthwhile for the lower earner, usually the woman, to pursue an extra income, because that income would be counted against the lower tax bracket, at least if you have a progressive tax system. And the second policy, affordable public childcare, gives women the opportunity to take that step, to join the labor market. And in Sweden, municipalities must provide affordable and high-quality public childcare for all children from the age of 1. And the cost for this depends on your income, but it's capped at the maximum $150 per month, and that's for the highest earners. Finally, generous and gender-neutral parental leave, which we introduced in Sweden as the first country in the world, allows mothers the option to return to work without losing valuable career opportunities or being left out of the workforce for too long. Sweden was the first country in the world to introduce this in 1974. And in today's version, parents get 480 days of paid parental leave per child. 3 of those months are reserved for each parent and cannot be transferred to encourage more fathers to use parental leave. And this has given fathers a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to bond with a new family member on their own terms, an opportunity that many fathers, myself included, I have 2 daughters, 5 and 8 years old, that I spend lovely parental leave with. Many fathers cherish this as an invaluable moment in their child's upbringing. And today in Sweden, it would seem strange, almost irresponsible in most workplaces, including the foreign ministry where I work, if fathers wouldn't use at least a few days of parental leave. Put together, these 3 policy reforms, individual taxation, affordable childcare, and gender-neutral paid parental leave, provides the opportunity for both parents, men and women, to combine a career with a family life, greatly advancing women's freedoms to make life choices that were long reserved only for men. Now, what choice men and women and families make are, of course, up to them. But these policies introduced by Sweden at least provides the support system to level the playing field and give more families more choices. And this has contributed to Sweden's high level of employment and growth as well. At 80%, Sweden has the highest female labor force participation rate in the European Union. And according to the OECD, this has contributed to up to 20% of our GDP growth for the past 50 years. Now, coming back to those friends and counterparts I mentioned, who says, we could never have a feminist government or a feminist policy in the United States. I believe that if you look at the content of some of these policies that we label as perhaps feminist or focused on gender equality, I'm sure that America actually could. And those of you who have followed the marathon Capitol Hill series called Build Back Better know that there are actually several similar proposals to what I just described making the rounds in Congress. And there may be good reasons that they haven't been passed yet, but I can only speak to Sweden's experience. And I think the other Swedish speakers on this panel would agree when I say it would be political suicide for any Swedish politician to try to remove government-financed childcare or paid parental leave. Once introduced, the benefits of these policies are simply obvious, both for the state and for the vast majority of families. Hopefully, US families will get to experience that for themselves one day. Finally, I want to end by stating the obvious that the ambassador also mentioned is that Sweden is not perfect. Women in Sweden still earn less than men. They're underrepresented in business and particularly in top positions in listed companies on the stock market. And the Me Too movement showed that women in Sweden and across the world still have to fight for their right to their own bodies, their right to go to work without being sexually harassed, and their right to be judged on the same professional merits as men. But Sweden didn't launch a feminist government or a feminist foreign policy because there's nothing left to do, but because we all need to roll our sleeves and get back to work, or get to work. And what better day to start than this International Women's Day? So thank you so much. And Stacey, I realized halfway through my speech, maybe I cut off your introduction and started too quickly, but I hope that's okay. And I look forward to continuing to participate in the discussion. Thank you. And sorry, I think you're muted, Stacey.
I almost said a bad word, sorry. Thank you, Peter, for such information that even me working for a Swedish employer for 25 years and knowing some of those things on the periphery, hearing the real history and the actual impact on society is extremely inspiring, especially today. Just to bring everybody back to the topic, for those of you who don't are not familiar with the Swedish American Chamber of Commerce, it is an organization that has 20 regional chambers for Sweden in the United States, which has about 2,300 members. It's the second largest European Chamber of Commerce in the United States. So thank you for those of you sitting in Sweden, and of course to you, Peter, who represents Sweden more formally today. This event today is really to highlight separate and fundamental conditions that and efforts related to gender equality with the purpose of inspiring, let's say, further efforts to #break the bias between genders. We have 4 focus areas today: policy, strategic, operational, and individual. So, of course, Peter will join the panel representing policy, as you may have heard. We also have Lacey Ahlf. I hope I pronounce it correctly as an American, but I think you are also born in the United States. Lacey started as a civil engineer I won't say many years ago because we are very young, but But she's worked in project development and construction for her career, the last 10 plus years with Skanska, which is one of the world's largest development and construction companies. It was founded in Sweden in 1887 as a cement company, which I find really interesting. And I learned that while getting ready for today. So thank you. And she's joining us from the Pacific Northwest of the United States in the Seattle area, I believe. So thank you for being here to represent the operational aspects of gender equality. Next, I will introduce Josephine Harmansen. And she's here representing the individual perspective. She has studied a lot of things: project management, psychology, organizational psychology, gender, politics, as well as inclusion and diversity. Today, she's working with a company, Impact Arena, that partners with businesses and people in the people and culture field, sometimes known as human resources in the United States, but inspiring that we now call it people and culture inside our Swedish companies. She helps them grow and scale their companies from a people perspective, which is hard work. And welcome to you, Josephine. I think you said you're sitting in Uddevalla, which is maybe 1 hour from Gothenburg, if I understood correctly. So thank you for being here. Next, we have Anna Lundbergh. So I try to do it with my Swedish accent. She's here representing the strategic part of gender equality. She works for Almi. And over her career, she has worked for a number of industries, today serving on several boards. And at Almi, they focus on companies and business concepts that have growth potential. So in short, Almi loans money to companies with growth potential and assists in their business development, both in the startup phase and in well-established companies. So she will bring some of the strategic thinking around gender equality to this discussion. So with that, and staying with you, Anna, why don't you start us off and tell us just from the beginning, before you get into a few things you want to share, why this day is personally and or professionally so important to you?
I think the financial and economic perspective is where I can do most good in this question. So that's my focus. So I will contribute to increased equality in business. And there are a lot of questions, of course, that's important, but that's my question, I think, the best for me.
Thank you. And did you want to start with your short presentation?
Yes, I do.
Okay. Just a moment. Are you bringing up any media?
Yeah, I think, can you see them now?
Here they come, I believe. And I feel they're loading. So depending where we're sitting in the world, some people may see them more quickly than others. And there you are. So thank you, Anna, please.
Yeah, and I'm so glad being here today. And I like facts, new knowledge, and using my knowledge for driving a change. And that's why I initiated Almi's survey board survey, which is a tool that highlights gender equality and diversity in limited companies boards. And the background why I started with this survey is that so many companies do not use the fantastic tool that board are for developing a company. And Stacey told you more about the company that I work in, but in Almi, we contribute to growth and renewal in businesses, all sectors, and from the first tiny idea to bigger businesses. The Almi's parent company is owned by the Swedish government, and we have 16 subsidiaries, which both are state and regional owned. And that's, we think that is very good, because then we know the market nationwide and regional. And we work with about 10,000 customers each year, and we are 500 employees. And as state-owned, we shouldn't compete with private companies. We should fill the gaps in the market and address the problems and the opportunities that businesses have. And I also appreciate that the government has set clear goals in their ownership directive, and that says that Almi should contribute to growth, to a higher level of gender parity and diversity in business. It provides a good foundation for my work with the board survey. Here you can see a quick view of what we delivered last year. At Almi, the work with gender equality and diversity is an important part of our group's sustainable work, and of us, of course, being an attractive employer. We really are a company of equality. As you see in this picture, the distribution between men and women are at every level are even. And we also are convinced that that is important, but to mirror the companies that we work with. And we are also convinced that we can contribute to higher quality and diversity in the companies that we work with. And for us, equality is a financial question. The board survey is one example of a tool that we can use directly in the meetings with our customers. And I'm proud of working in such an organization that contribute to structural change. If we look at the equality on boards and see why it's important, research points at these arguments when discussing why gender equality and diversity is important in board or in management group. It's about broader understanding of customer need, an increased innovation rate, higher quality in discussions and decisions, and it gives higher traction. And we all want to both work in and do business with fair companies. And there are countless surveys from many different countries that have been conducted on larger companies that show economic benefits. But we didn't find a survey on Swedish small and medium-sized companies. So, and as we know that money talks, we decided to find out if companies with equal boards earn and sell more than other companies. And the answer is, of course, yes. We hired Malin Malmström, a researcher and professor in entrepreneurship and innovation, to find the answer. If companies with equal boards succeeded better than others. We gave her a huge database with about 100 Swedish companies from 4 different years. This survey clearly shows that companies with equal boards have higher sales and results than others, than those who haven't equal boards. These regardless of type of industry, size of company, or whether the CIO is a woman or a man. And we can see the same result in companies that have an equal amount of board members with both foreign as Swedish background. And the highest results are in companies with both that both have gender equality and diversity. So with this information, we are working actively for inspiring more companies to both hire board members from other countries and more women on boards. And as Peter talked about the policy reforms, keep in mind that 50% of Sweden's population consists of women and 50% men. And we are seen as the most equal country in the, one of the most equal countries in the world. We have legal structures that really support us with tax systems that allow everyone to get education. Everyone has the right to childcare, and we have a long parental leave. We also have laws that regulate discrimination and so on. What does it look like then? Although these legal structures although these legal structural conditions are favorable, we are not as equal as we wish. The picture shows how equal boards are. As you can see from the bar in the middle, only 16% of the boards are equal. And we mean that the proportion of women and men are respectively is in the range of 40 to 60% or more even. As you can see, 7% of the boards are dominated by women and 67 of men. And companies that have equal boards, in them we can see that the distribution of men and women are equal, and that equal chose equal. There are more female board members in the boards that are women dominated and less women in the boards that are men dominated. There is a higher amount of both women as CIOs and chairpersons in companies that have equal boards. Now to the portion of women as board members. 35% of the board members in listed companies are female and 65% are men. Here you can see a big difference compared to the limited companies, where the companies, 20% are women and 80% are men. The listed companies are more public and more examined, and it's not okay today with a homogeneous board. You get punished by the market. And also the sectors makes a difference. There's a huge difference depending on which sector you look at. There are smallest share of women in the industry and largest share in health and education. These picture with sectors that can be good to have in mind for understand why it differs from region to region. This is my last picture, and until now I have presented facts that are not so hopeful. And that says that we have a long way to gender parity in limited boards in Sweden. I will end this presentation in a more hopeful tone. Even if fewer board seats have been has been added the last year, maybe because of depending on the pandemic, there are more positions that have been filled with women. Of 1,302 new board seats since last year, as many as 1,101 have been filled with women. That is a total of 80%, and 301 have been filled with men. This picture is in line with what we in Almi can see in the market. We can see an increase in companies who want to hire board members that have other skills than themselves. We work with companies that doesn't have an active board. Many companies that we work with are not having an active board today, but now they see the benefit. The reason is that so many things have happened so quickly in the environment. Many companies are standing in front of increased need to market requirements linked to new behaviors that they cannot address. And it's hard to analyze the consequence for the company by your own and which actions the company need to take for keeping the competitiveness in the future. And here will a board with the right skills be a good help. So personally, I believe that we have never had such a good situation as now to create a business life where we become more inclusive with more diverse workforce and leadership than we have today, because it's both a request from the market and the companies have understand that they really need to answer on that. Neither they want to or not. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Anna. That was really inspiring, and I'm so grateful you left us with hope at the end because I started to feel very nervous. The work that you do is tremendous, and I assume that it is very difficult. So thank you for what you contribute. For those of you who have questions for Anna, I have a million, but you can put them in the chat at any time during this formal presentation, and we will come to as many of those questions as we can after we hear our panelists. So as such, I think because we went policy, strategic, now maybe we go to operational. So Lacey, are you ready? You're on mute, which you're human.
There we go. Now can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So hi, everyone. My name is Lacey Ahlf, and I'm the Vice President of Operations for Skanska, and I'm happy to be here with you today on International Women's Day. I work out of the Seattle office for Skanska in my role, I'm responsible for staffing, for work culture, commercial management, continuous improvement, and technology, just to name a few things. I'm also an executive sponsor of our Inclusion Council and the past chair nationally of our Skanska Women's Network, the only employee resource group for Skanska here in the United States. Within the industry, I'm also a past president of the local chapter of Commercial Real Estate for Women, also known as CREW. I'm a graduate of the University of Washington, where I majored in civil engineering. And then because I couldn't get enough schooling, I did go get my master's in business administration from Kelley School of Business a few years after I graduated with my undergrad, while working full time. So before I go further, I wanted you to know a little bit about who I am outside of work. I am a single mom to 2 boys, my youngest whom is autistic. They keep me very busy just trying to keep up with them and watching all their lacrosse games. I also like to take time for some of my passions for all things outdoors. I love to golf and ski. I spend a lot of time biking, running, and swimming because I like to race triathlons. And in fact, I just did my first half Ironman at the end of last year. I also love fun times with my girlfriends. And my place of calm, that picture in the middle, is in front of a puzzle. Being a mom and keeping up with all those duties, as well as all the other things I love to do in life, while also being successful at work, is a challenge. And a big part of gender equality is having a place of work that allows women to balance all those aspects of life. And that is where I'll start my talk today. So construction has traditionally been a male-dominated industry and still is today. We have made progress. The demographic of our office in Seattle is nearly 30% female, which is a huge change over the last couple decades that I've been in the industry. But it's still 20% short of general society. Females are still the minority, and many things in our business are planned around the needs of a man, because that was almost the entire demographic of the business for decades. In order to talk about gender equality, we first have to talk about inclusion and how we make our business as an appealing career for women. I'm lucky that in my role, I'm able to influence and drive culture change in order to make our business a more inclusive place for women. Approximately 6 years ago, I partnered with one of our local vice presidents and our HR business partner to conduct focus group meetings with our people. The first few focus group discussions we had were with groups of female employees at all levels. We listened and heard many positive things, but there was also a long list of challenges that other females felt were holding them back or frustrating them in our business. We also met with several other demographic groups and had similar discussions. But based on the feedback we received from those focus groups meetings, our leadership team decided to adopt a work culture as a focus leadership imperative in 2016. We went to work and created an action item list that initially had 20 different things we wanted to improve in our business that would make our business a more inclusive place for all employees. We found that our action items fell into 2 different categories, which were either improving work-life balance or improving work environment. So don't worry, I'm not going to go into all these items, but I do want to just highlight a few. And here's our list of our work-life balance and workplace environment items. So under work-life balance, we wanted to change the traditional expectation of office and field hours. Now, if you're not familiar with construction, most job sites start at latest at 7 a.m. And although craft people leave our jobs at about 3:30, which is an 8-hour day, 30-minute lunch break, the management side of the project continues to plan the project. But what was happening was the office side of the project was expected to be at stretch and flex at 6:30 a.m., yet they would have meetings starting at 4 or 5 p.m. that night. Now, I'll do the math for you. People were working well over 12-hour days on a daily basis. And this has got to stop because we were burning out people. So we asked that people be smart with their time. Come to stretch and flex on days they didn't have late afternoon meetings. And if they did have a late afternoon meeting, then please do not come to stretch and flex. We need to be smarter with our time. Now, another one we did was no meeting Friday. We found a lot of our work consists of meetings, as I'm sure everyone on this call is very familiar with. We heard people were working on the weekends due to just not having enough time during the work week to just work at their desk. Therefore, we decided that Friday is a great day to implement no meeting Fridays. I personally set in my calendar to be busy all day. This way, I actually have time, along with my colleagues, to do some strategy or email, because, the never-ending email. This time allows me to not have to work on the weekends and spend the time on the things that I love, my family, my friends, my sporting events. Now, my last example is under workplace environment. It may sound simple, but having standards for project offices creates a more inclusive and happy place to work. How, may you ask? Well, women that look around and see no mother's room in a project trailer may start to question, is this a place they continue to work if they have a child? Where can they pump? Because I know personally, I had to go out to my car to pump. That's not very fair, and that's not very fun. If you can't envision a place that you work to be an environment where you can personally and professionally develop, then you don't feel included. And this is what has to change and why we now have a wellness room in each of our project offices. We have a big business with lots of demands, but we have begun to move the needle with some of our actions. In order to support our work culture and ultimately end up with a fully inclusive culture, we have also implemented other things to support our culture. We have an inclusion council that actively guides our journey to full inclusion. We continue to hold focus groups to keep our pulse on our people and our progress. We have established diversity, equity, and inclusion as one of our leadership imperatives over the next several years. And we continue to hold educational sessions on racism, sexism, equity, and human rights. At Skanska, our values support our inclusive culture. In particular, our care for life value, which means we care for each other and all of our similarities and differences. And be better together, which means we find our strength through inclusion and diversity and working together. Once you have a good culture in place, an inclusive culture, you begin to make an impact on equality and equity. And I look at equality in two different buckets, intangible and tangible. Tangible equality are things we can fairly easily measure and track: demographics, pay differentials, promotion equality, and work assignments. But the intangible equality are harder to measure. Are female voices actually being heard in the meeting rooms and boardrooms? Are typical gender roles commonly the default? Women take the notes? Women are cleaning up after the lunch meetings? And when two people meet someone, is the expectation that the man is the boss, or is the woman the boss? There are still days when the traditions of our business seem like an overwhelming challenge to creating equality. And yeah, that is me at the Empire State Building being grabbed by King Kong. But as overwhelming the challenge is, I do take to heart in the fact that we are making progress one step at a time. Once you have the culture right and you've created an environment where women can grow and thrive, equality begins to fall into place. So my challenge to all of you is to look at your surroundings. What can you start to do to make culture change? It takes all of us to make that change.
Thank you so much, Lacey. Again, a number of things to inspire people of all genders today on International Women's Day. It seems that Skanska is really paying attention. And in the beginning, I thought you were just a civil engineer, but I really admire I really admire your passion and productivity around having gender equality, kind of when it comes down to the real place of work. So thank you for that. And I feel, you certainly well represented the operational aspects of how you can embed these, let's say, inequalities, for lack of a better word, into workplaces anywhere in the world. So it's all about the individual, really. Some people say, why don't things change? But it really takes the individual actions of individual people to get things done. So with that, I would like to once again introduce Josephine Harmansen, who will focus on the individual aspects of this type of work. And she works for a company called Impact Arena, which I introduced earlier, and they are really working hard to grow and scale companies, especially from this people or individual aspect. So, Josephine, if you are ready, please.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm going to speed up this presentation a bit because I see that the time's running out. So I'm not going to talk that much about me, but I want to say that my engagement to gender equality and equality started by, I think I was 9 years old, when I, for the first time in my life, heard that, no, I don't think that you can do that because you're a girl. And so it started there for me. So speed up to today, when I'm helping organizations to build organizations with great culture for everyone. And I'm especially going to focus on the individual perspective. Like, I really think that everyone can do something. And one thing is to learn a little bit more about ourselves and how we work so we can do even better decisions. So that's what I'm going to talk to you about today. Just
sounds great, and we'll give you a moment to bring up your media. There you go.
Thank you. I'm jumping right into 2009, when a scientist named David Rock launched a paper on, when he had looked into tons and tons of scientific papers about neuropsychology, when they had looked into the brain and how our brain works. Every human brain, it hasn't developed over 1,000 years, so I think this is still, we can still take on this today. So what he found is that there is an overlap by the physical pain that we feel, the areas in our brain where we feel physical pain, and our social needs. So when they look at brain scans, we can see that these areas light up at the same time. So when, for example, you are in a group and you don't feel fairly treated, sometimes we use the words like, when you say that to me, it really hurts. And that is because we really feel that, like, in physical pain. So he found that we have 5 areas where this happens when we are in social situations with other people. So when we understand this better, we can do better decisions. So one of those is status, our social position in relation to others. The second one is certainty. We want certainty as human beings. To what extent we can predict what will happen in the future. And autonomy. We want to have choices. We want to decide by ourselves. And we want relatedness to others, the extent to which we feel connected to a group. And we want fairness. To what extent do we feel that we or others are treated fairly? So, look at status. For example, say that we want to promote someone and you are a manager and you see that you have an engaged employee that really does well and that are maybe going up to a new position, but maybe you feel threatened. So what's going to happen to me if I promote this person? Do I get less status, for example? So in that way, we always look to see if are you above me in the hierarchy or are you beneath me in the hierarchy? And this always constantly affects what decisions we take. And even if we are recruiting, for example, how do you, which position do you gonna have in comparison to me? So which position do I get in the team when you come in? So when we feel threatened, this could make us do some decisions that we don't want to. And we're going to connect this dots in the end. And we also want certainty. So we want to know what's going to happen in the future. So if we talk about recruitment again as an example, we can see that if I'm sitting and recruiting a person, it feels more safe if you look a lot like me. And if you talk like me, if you move like me, that makes me feel safe. And when I feel safe, I want to choose you. But that doesn't say anything about your competence or really who you are as a person or your background or anything really. It just says that you are a lot like me. But it makes me feel safe. So when we talk about gut feeling, that is what we feel. Another example that I'm not going to talk that much about is, because we don't have that much time, is autonomy. We want to choose by ourselves, but you can use this model even in your private life as well, in every relationship you have. So that could be good to just know that we want to choose. So, for example, when we are leading change, this could be a good thing to know when we are talking to people that maybe we should give them some options, but not tons of options, because then we are feeling uncertain, but leading in the right way, but not saying like we have to do like this. Because then you're going to get a lot of people saying like, no, I'm not going to do that. And when we're talking about big changes like gender equality, maybe you have noticed that not everyone wants to go in that direction. And then we're talking to this social needs not being met because we don't understand, we just react instinctively. We also want to feel relatedness. We want to feel being a part of a group. So we, again, like those who look a lot like ourselves, that we can relate in some way to. But we can also work around this by just shaking hands with another person. That makes me instantly feel that I'm more related to you. And when we talk about in a group, for example, talking about like, what do relate us as a group? How do we connect each other? So we can work around this that we instinctively want to feel. And we also have fairness. We want to feel that we or others are treated fairly. And this is a good thing to know, for example, when, again, building structure in organizations. Treat everyone as an equal. That could be, again, in recruitment, asking all of the candidates the same questions, for example. not just go by the gut feeling, talking to them whatever feels right for the moment. Like really asking them the same questions, giving them the same opportunity, treated them fairly. And then you also got to get a great reputation for your company or organization. So with this knowledge, we can do more wise decisions in gender equality, but in many other aspects as well. So with this, I want to just build awareness. Like the more you know about yourself, the better decisions you can make. Create structure to minimize bias, because this is a human thing. Everyone got biases, so we need to build structure. For example, in recruitment, the same questions for everyone. And ask for more perspectives. Take in other perspectives, because you have your own biases. Like ask others, what do you think about this? Is this the right? I feel like this? Like put your feelings into words. Why do I take this decision? Is it on to really build awareness again around what you do in your everyday work? Then you really can make a big difference in many ways. Yeah, thank you.
Josephine, thank you so much. Really, once again, and you may want to stop share. Oh, thank you. Stop sharing your slides. I know we're almost out of time, and there are so many questions, at least for me personally, for you, Josephine, just as I have for the rest of the panel. However, we are coming to our close time. So I think that you can find any of our panelists very easily if you're following the Swedish American Chamber of Commerce, DC, Carolinas, and Georgia on LinkedIn. All of our panelists are available, and you can connect to them and send them your question. Also, alternatively, Sarah Granelli, the person working for SACC that created and managed all of us to make today possible. If you want to field questions, you don't have to, but if you want to, perhaps you can put your email in the chat, and if somebody has a question, they can forward it, send it to you, and you can forward it on to our panelists. Not everybody loves LinkedIn, for that matter. So, starting with you, Peter, thank you for really explaining some of the policy in great detail. I found that to be very interesting, especially as an American, but also as an American working for a Swedish company who knows that. When we moved on to Anna, you are doing, as I said, hard work to change boards. It takes time, it takes energy, and it takes intention. And then bringing it to the work level. Lacey, that was beautiful, representing Skanska and all of the things that you're doing at an operational level in order to make the workplace more gender equal, and to what we say today, #break the bias. And Josephine, moving on to you. We might have been separated at birth because I am just so fascinated in the same things around psychological safety that you brought us today. And I have a lot of people to thank for that, but I really enjoyed your presentation. And, you know, anyone on the line working in HR is probably already thinking about these things. However, there's a lot of science behind it, which really helps us break the bias for sure, because every brain has so many unconscious biases that we can't even count them, and we don't even know that we have them. So with that, thank you to all four of you. If there's anything that any of the four of you want to add, please feel free to raise your hand or just unmute, because most other people cannot unmute you. On behalf of SACC, Swedish American Chamber of Commerce, thank you for your time, for being here. Please, Peter, thank Madam Ambassador Ahlf for her words in the beginning. I see, Sarah, that you put your email into the chat box. where anybody on this call can access it and send their questions to her, and she will get it to our very excellent panelist where you have the questions. So the Swedish Chamber also will put this recording out, I believe, on a website or LinkedIn. But if you attended, I assume you will get via email. So if there's anything you wanted to go back and hear again, you definitely can do so within a few days. With that, if there's no other closing comments, Anna, I see perhaps you have one. No? Okay, sorry. I'm trying to look at the camera and see all of the movement. So thank you for being here today. Happy International Women's Day to all of you and the women who are involved in your lives, the communities you serve, and in the workplace, as we talked about today. It was an honor to moderate this panel, and I look forward to hearing from all of you again. Take care.